Ladies and gentlemen, One Piece chapter 1125 is out. It feels like it's been forever since I've done like a chapter review. I don't know why. I think it's only been like 2 weeks, but regardless, we have a lot to talk about. This chapter had a lot of information and a lot of, I want to say, foreshadowing for the future. So we definitely have some stuff I want to discuss. So let's just jump right into it. Also, real quick, I am back at school for my last year at college, so excuse the bad, perhaps camera quality or mic quality or audio or stuff like that. So the first thing I want to talk about here is Rob Lucci killing Stussy. I don't think this is the end of the story for Kaku and Rob Lucci. I think there's a lot left for them in the final war. I think there's a lot left for everybody in the final war, but I do think we're going to be seeing them again. But I think the fact that we're even getting this dialogue of Rob Lucci has killed Stussy and Kaku's in the background, like kind of almost grieving it, is leaving a lot of room for, I don't want to say a betrayal, but as we know, there's a lot of division going on amongst the world government and the Navy and all that stuff. So potentially Kaku kind of splitting off along with other Navy members. Also in this chapter, we see Vice Admirals kind of share the same kind of thing where one of their comrades is killed right in front of them with Saturn, which we'll get into later. But there's just been a lot of, I guess we can call it foreshadowing, and also like laying that foundation of some kind of split between the Marines and the world government, even with people like Akainu reacting to Vegapunk's message. So I think this falls into that category where Kaku is kind of having this moment where he's realizing he's not fighting on the right side. Now we have this conversation with Saturn and the Vice Admirals who failed to catch Luffy. The first thing that popped into my mind in the beginning of this conversation was Saturn telling them not to go to Elbaf to capture Luffy. Now, there's a few implications from this. And it could be really any one of them, but I'm just going to discuss what the possibilities are. Number one, the simplest one, is that he knows that a bunch of Vice Admirals are not going to be able to take on the Elbaf warriors with the Straw Hat Pirates and also potentially the Red-Haired Pirates there. It's just a futile attempt. Why would you go attack two Yonkos with a group of Vice Admirals? That seems the most likely to me. Or there could be something about Elbaf, perhaps similar to Wano, where it has like this kind of seclusion from the world government, and there's like this mysterious force that is preventing the world government from intervening with that country. For example, in Wano, it was the samurai. Maybe Elbaf, I mean, we know the giants are very strong, but maybe Loki himself, who we know has been foreshadowed all the way back in Whole Cake Island, has some kind of force that is makes it very difficult for the world government to take over Elbaf. So he's saying, don't go to Elbaf, that's not our jurisdiction. Or third, this kind of has to do with his dialogue about the Iron Giant in the next panel. He is kind of debating how to tackle this Luffy situation, and he wants to just hold off for now, right? Because it seems to me that this whole dialogue with Saturn talking about, the Iron Giant hasn't moved in 200 years, yet it moved to protect Straw Hat Luffy, is Saturn kind of realizing, okay, this really is Joy Boy, Like, we're going to have to put all of our resources into stopping Joy Boy, because this is the real deal, right? And he wants to kind of take a step back and don't go after Luffy at Elbaf. We need to really think about how to tackle this because this is a gigantic threat to the world government. All of that being said, the only thing that's important is the fact that there will be no Navy attack in Elbaf. It's going to be kind of, at least in my opinion, a more pirate-centered arc. All of this coming from Saturn, though, doesn't even matter because he's dead. Saturn died. We all expected him to die at the end of the arc, whether it be from the hands of Kuma, the hands of Luffy, or just the hands of the raid on Egghead. I don't think any of us expected Emu to kill Saturn, but we're not there yet. Let's continue to the chapter, and then we'll get to what that means for the future. So before we get to all that crazy stuff, I want to talk about Punk Records flying into the sky. I didn't expect this, but I do remember a few chapter reviews ago when Lilith on the Elbaf ship said, everybody's alive. I was debating whether that meant she's saying the Straw Hats are alive, or for some reason all the Vegapunks are still alive. Turns out all the Vegapunks are still alive. They have spare bodies, and their brain is stored in the cloud. That's pretty cool. I really wonder what implication this will have on the future of the story, whether this is going to be like an epilogue thing where like after the world is saved and like Luffy has like what's the word I'm looking for? Has liberated the world. the Vegapunks act as some kind of like, let's create an infinite energy source like Vegapunk's main Vegapunk's dream was, or if they're going to play a more current role in the story, and maybe the Vegapunks are going to come back for the final war as some kind of info hub to kind of gather and inform people to Straw Hat Luffy's side. I'm not sure. Regardless, I think it was pretty cool to see them alive. I'm not really going to count this as a fake out death because we did get deaths in Egghead Island, so this is totally fine for me. Pretty cool to see Egghead Island still play a role in the story. Like, the island itself is literally floating away and it's going to come back in the story. I think that's really cool, and I think it could have some implications for the future, which is awesome. And next up, we finally see the results of the revolutionary raid during the Reverie, where all of the Celestial Dragons are losing their food reserves, and I think that's pretty cool because it's kind of building up this tension that something needs to happen, right? The Celestial Dragons are starting to get uncomfortable. The world now knows it's sinking. There's going to be some kind of clashing of ideals, and a war is brewing. The tensions are starting to rise on both sides of the world spectrum here. So I think that's why it's pretty important we find out the Celestial Dragons are starving, and I'm glad Oda included that. But what's even more interesting from this Marie Joie section of the chapter is that Garling is taking Saturn's spot as a 5 elder, as an elder star. That is so interesting to me. I don't think anyone had this on their bingo card for the future of the story. And let me just get this out of the way. I love this because we know Garling has relationships with seemingly Shanks, but also with a lot of other characters in the story through God Valley. So to have a character who has kind of intertwined relationships with all these other characters who are still relevant in the story be now thrusted into this position where they're going to be a future villain 100% is super interesting to me. I also just want to mention the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this kind of muscled up Garling walking to his new position was he really reminds me of Garp. Obviously, they have very different ideals, which we already know. Even though we don't know much about Garling, I can tell you right now that these two would not like each other. Just his kind of stature and his kind of like vibe as like a very strong old head, I'm getting that same kind of thing. Even the Gorosei's kind of reaction to him is like, oh crap, like this is bad news, right? Like this guy is joining our ranks. He's a tough guy. So I'm super, super, super excited to see what he can do. He strikes me as a very, very strong character. And I'm super glad that Oda has kind of shown us why he was introduced in the way he was for him to now take Saturn's spot. This also kind of tackles the issue of people saying, oh, if Saturn dies, that's one less Gorosei member for like a matchup in the final war. Here's our answer. It's someone even cooler than Saturn, someone who has connections to older characters, and someone who is definitely a very, very strong character. So I'm completely on board with this. I think it's amazing. Now, speaking of Saturn, his death. This was, like I said before, expected for him to die this arc, completely unexpected for it to happen this way. I am now 100%, I don't want to say confirmed because it's not confirmed, but I am full in on the theory I mentioned a few chapter reviews ago that the Gorosei are like proxies of Imu's body. They are getting their powers from him. They have lived their seemingly immortal lives because of the powers of Imu, and Imu 100% controls their activities. Imu literally extracted his strength from Saturn, and he died immediately. Whether or not Imu killed Saturn or just the absence of his power in Saturn's body made Saturn age to 300 and he just died of old age, I don't know. The important thing is that Imu has some kind of power to disperse his devil fruit or his lineage or bloodline or something into his soldiers or whatever you want to call the Gorosei to make them his. It really reminds me of Muzan and the demons from Demon Slayer, how he can kind of just blow them up because they all take his blood. Same thing happened here with Saturn. I think this is awesome. It kind of parallels how Vegapunk and the Vegapunk satellites were in the Egghead Island arc. So for this connection to finally come to at least for me, for it to be confirmed is pretty cool. It also begs the question, is Garling now going to get Imu's power, or is he strong enough to kind of last as his own kind of identity or entity without Imu's power? If you ask me, I would predict that he's going to get Imu's power because Imu wants to control the Gorosei for himself. Obviously, Imu seems like a very controlling person, so it makes sense that he would that's kind of like part of the deal. Like if you want to be a Gorosei member, you have to take my power so I can control you, type of thing. But I guess that is to be seen. We're gonna find out in the future. Biggest takeaway from me though here is that Emu has some kind of very, very, very strange power, and he is controlling Gorosei members to his own will, which just further plays into the whole he is the controller of the world that Luffy has to defeat kind of vibe. And we end the chapter with this dragon line where a world where people fight over safe places will come soon. I do love me a dragon voice line where he's just kind of just staring out at the sea and not doing anything like normal. Um, but he is right, and this kind of goes back to how I mentioned Oda gave us the time to see that the Celestial Dragons are now suffering without food reserves, and there's kind of this tension building on that side of the world. There's also going to be tension on the civilian side of the world where people are going to be fighting for safe places to live if the world is going to sink into the water, which leads me to believe that we are closer to the final war than we ever have been, which I guess is the nature of One Piece. As the chapters go on, we just get closer to the end anyway. But what I mean is that it really feels like tension is building everywhere. The Yonko are now all going for the One Piece. The Celestial Dragons are realizing they can't live by themselves if they don't have any food. The people around the world are realizing the world's about to end. It looks like Dragon maybe finally about to make a move because the world is entering this kind of state of chaos. Just the feeling that Oda gives me every time one of these chapters comes out, where that we're getting closer and closer to this grand war finale that spans the entire globe of One Piece. It's amazing, and he's just so good at building that kind of grand feeling around his storytelling, and I think for that reason I love this chapter. I love Egghead Island, and I'm so excited to get to Elbaf. And we don't have a break next week, so whether we get another chapter like this, where it's kind of like a newspaper chapter and we get bounty raises, or if we're going straight into Elbaf and we see perhaps the Straw Hats again, I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. So, until next time.